We're going to be talking about what to do if you haven't heard from your schools yet, because I know there's a lot of anxiety around the fact that some of you are just like waiting. You're like, listen, I applied. Some of you applied in like October, and you're like, where is my letter? I just want to know. Right. So, we're going to talk about that feeling. We're going to talk about what to do if you haven't heard back from your schools yet. We're going to talk about the fact that some of you, a lot of you, have deposit deadlines that are due in April. That is the most common month for deposit deadlines. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit more about deposit deadlines in the next coming weeks, but we're going to start that conversation now. It's like March, right? Deposit deadlines start next month. And I know that there's anxiety because some of you are like, I have 8 schools that I haven't heard from. What am I supposed to be doing with my life? Like, how can I even start making a decision? How can I start scholarship negotiation? How can I do anything when I don't have all the information? So I want to break that down into 3 things. One, what should your contact be to the schools that you have not yet heard from, and maybe some reasons why you haven't heard. 2, how you can still make meaningful decisions and start preparing for those deposit deadlines now, even with the information that you have. And 3, we're going to just touch on a little bit of deposit deadline etiquette, do's and don'ts, that differ a little bit in the law school space from the college space. So, that first thing, what should your interactions be with schools that you have not yet heard from? You want to make sure that you are striking a fine line between reaching out and being annoying. I don't know. It's been a while since I've said this. I usually talk about this when we talk about creating relationships with admissions, but you never want to be annoying. That is the quickest way to not get into a school. There are humans on the other side of the admission desk, right? I always try to humanize the admission process as much as possible. That there are people who are working really hard, who care about you, who are trying their best. And it's so easy to just forget that there are people there and to just kind of like email them all the time. Don't do that. Because then even if they did like you, they're gonna be like, ugh, Sydney again. She's emailing us again to see where we are with her application. Just deny her. No, they're not going to do that. They're not thinking that. But they will be annoyed, and you just don't want to annoy people because you are a kind, courteous, wonderful human who does not want to be an annoying pest. But that does not mean that you have to be afraid to reach out to them. That does not mean that you can't say anything to them or be afraid of them, right? But you can be respectful. So there's a lot of different reasons why you may not have heard from your schools yet. And some of it really does depend also on when you applied. And I know that I'm going to say this and someone's going to be like, but other people have heard from the school, and that's okay. We have to remember that the law school application process is comparative and holistic. What that means is that your application is always kind of in conversation with other applicants. And so other applicants, they may have heard already. They may have gotten in, they may have gotten denied. Just because you haven't heard does not mean that you're not getting in, and it does not mean that you're definitely getting in, right? It just means that you haven't heard. And so the first piece of advice I'm going to give is do not make assumptions based on the fact that you have not heard. No information is sometimes good information because trust me, it doesn't take that much thinking to deny you, right? Like if they really weren't considering your application at all, you would have gotten denial by now. Now, you may still get denied, but they're at least thinking about it. They are at least reading your application. They're at least considering it. And that should make you feel at least somewhat better because, like I said, if it was like an easy deny, you would have had that denial already. But you don't. You don't have a denial. You don't have an acceptance, but you don't have a denial. And so don't make assumptions about what that silence means because that will just cause you to be more anxious. And anxiety does nothing for us. Like anxiety produces no good results. So that's the first thing. Now, if you applied in October or November and you haven't heard anything, it is completely reasonable for you to send just a status update email. It's real short. Goes something like this. Hello, dear so and so, Hopefully you've been talking to someone at admissions, because I told you in September to start making connections with admissions and going to info sessions and introducing yourself. So hopefully you have someone that you've been talking to. But let's say you just didn't do that, which is okay. I'm not judging you. I'm not judging you. But let's say you didn't do that and you have no contacts, then it's just the admissions office, and that's okay. So, dear, so and so, or Office of Admissions. My name is Sydney Montgomery, and I applied in October to Sunnyside University Law School. I am so excited about the possibilities of, attending this school, and I just merely wanted to send an email to make sure that everything was complete on my end. I saw my status checker, it says complete or it says pending or whatever it says it is. Um, but it doesn't seem to have been updated since November, X date, whatever. Um, thank you so much for your time and consideration, and I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. So simple, right? Just like that. They're probably going to say, "Dear Sydney, yes, thank you so much. We are reviewing your application. Everything is complete, and we will let you know when we have a decision." It's probably what they're going to say. And that's okay, because at least hey, my application isn't lost. Because there is a slight possibility, I'm not saying it's a big possibility, it's like a 1% chance, right? That there is something that happened with your application. Maybe it got stuck somewhere, it didn't fully process, something with LSAC didn't come through. And it's just kind of better to know and fix it than to, be in this awkward situation in which like they're waiting for something and you're like, I didn't know that you were waiting for something. I would have given you something. So that is kind of one of those reasons why that status check is so important. Now, if you applied in February, like just do nothing. Like if you applied in January or you applied in February, your job right now is to wait. What I don't want you guys to start doing is sending letters of continued interest when you're not even waitlisted. One, because it's gonna be really awkward if you get waitlisted. You're gonna have to write a letter of continued interest anyways, and hopefully some new information. And if you use all the information on this letter of continued interest you don't need to be writing right now, you will have less things to say in the letter of continued interest that you actually do need to be writing, right? There's a limited amount of new updates that I'm sure that you could tell them. So if you're not waitlisted, you don't need to send them a letter of continued interest. If you've checked in and they've said, hey, we're all good, and that was 2 months ago, you don't need to check in again, right? This has been a historically slow application cycle. That means that decisions are coming a little slower, but that's okay. I would rather decisions come a little slower and they take their time and actually read your application than they rush through applications or they over enroll their class, right? I know it's not fun to be waiting, but there's definitely some benefit there. So, that's the kind of the don't, right? You don't need to be emailing them every month. You don't need to be panicking. A lot of decisions are going to come this month. This is a big month. They're very busy. And I want you to also remember that like law school admissions is not in a bubble. So if you look around, a lot of things have been slow this year. People got COVID. There was inflation, right? There is inflation still. There's a lot happening in the world and the country, and there are humans running the admissions process. So they're trying their best. They're doing the very best that they can. They're handling all of the applications. But, there are probably some offices in which maybe everyone got COVID in December or January, and people were out and people were covering things, or people's kids got sick, right? There's a lot that's happening in this world. And so when you try to remember that, when you're like, where's my application? Like there are humans on the other end who are just trying the best that they can to get through them. And you don't need to email them every month because they're working on it. But you should, if you applied like January and before, you should definitely receive most of your applications by the end of this month. Now, that brings me to my next point. You're like, okay, but I have to let some of these schools know by April 1. So, like, what am I supposed to do? I want you always to be evaluating your schools as if the schools that you've gotten into are the schools that you've gotten into, right? So it's hard to operate in uncertainty, but sometimes we can operate with the certain facts that we know now. So with the schools that you know now, What schools are you leaning towards? Have you been to admitted student visit days? Have you talked to students at affinity groups? Once you're into a school, this is really your opportunity to talk to students. When I decided to talk to BALSA students, the Black Law Students Association at the various schools that I got into, bruh, let me tell you, that changed the game. I went to visit some schools and I was like, oh no. Oh no. Oh no, I cannot go to school here. They were like, I'm telling you, like my number one school, I went there and I was like, it's not the move. Great school. But like the people and I, we just didn't get along. And that's okay. But I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't gone there. And sometimes you can't go and visit, but you can have phone calls. You can try to set up Zoom, networking meetings. Maybe you can sit in on a BALSA meeting. There's a lot of things that you can do to see, is this going to be a good fit school for me? You can start to, think about the scholarship offers that you currently have. One of the things that I have all of my students do is I have them put their information on a financial aid tracker. And I'm just going to break down the columns for you because you guys should do this too, right? I have one column for the school, and then I have another column for the total yearly cost. Like not just tuition, but personal costs, all the things that they put in their total cost of attendance for the year. And then I have my yearly scholarship. Like, what did I receive in scholarships? And then, how much money do I have saved? If it was me, it was zero. But don't be like me. But I was 21, I had zero. My parents had zero. We had $0 in savings, but that's fine. Right? I'm not judging you. And I said this because I know that there are people that are watching who have nothing in savings, and listen, you will be okay. But you have a column for savings, and then you have a column for loans. And then you have a column for what is the amount of money, right? After scholarships and the amount saved that I need to take out in loans. Maybe the school is offering some loans, but what is that loan amount? What's the delta? And then I want you to have a column for the average median salary from that school. Why do I want you to do all this? This seems extra, right? Because sometimes it's so easy to be like, this school gave me 30,000, this school gave me 40,000, this school gave me 50,000. But could you believe that the 30,000 school might actually be more affordable than the $50,000 school? Because $50,000 off $100,000 still leaves you paying $50,000. But $30,000 off of $50,000 leaves you only paying $20,000, right? So you can't just say, oh, this is how much each school gave me. Like, I want to know, what is the delta from each school? Because that's when you can really start to understand what your options are and what you even potentially might be negotiating. If you haven't watched my 2 videos on scholarship negotiation, definitely do that. But you have to come with more than just, I want you to match this school's $40,000 offer, right? Because it's really about, what is the delta? What do I need? And I want you to look at that median average starting salary, because if the median starting salary is $50,000 and your delta every year is $50,000, that's a bad idea. Don't do it. But if the median starting salary is $205,000 and your delta is $50,000, I mean, that's still a pretty big delta, but that's a lot more manageable, right? So I want you to have all of that in one place in a spreadsheet. For those of you who still haven't done the FAFSA, like do that immediately, like right now. Like don't even like listen to the rest of this. Just log off and do the FAFSA. It's so important. Because that is how you're going to be able to get potential federal loans if you need it. So I want you to start to do those things with the schools that you already know while you're waiting on the other schools. And this is because when we talk about preparing for April deadlines, you want to make sure that you know what you're going to do, right? Now, I don't love the idea of double deposits. I find it to be a little unethical because you can only go to one law school and someone else could have that seat. But there are certain very specific circumstances where maybe it's okay to put down 2 deposits, but I'd really rather you just put down 1 deposit to the school that you want to go to. But now let's say you from the schools that you know that you want to go to, you've picked Sunnyside University, and they have an April 1 deadline. You haven't heard from 8 schools, don't stress. But you know that if all of those 8 schools were to be a no, you would go to Sunnyside. Well, that's the school that you deposit at. And if you hear back later from another school that you want to go to more, you can withdraw your deposit from Sunnyside and then deposit at the school that you want. Now, unfortunately, you will lose your first deposit. So it is a little bit of an expensive situation. There are some things I want you to consider though. If you are a lower income student, or honestly, if just finances are tough, you can talk to the school about the deposit deadline amount. That is something that not a lot of people understand or think to do. But what do I always say, right? I always say, if you ask not, you receive not. And you got to be just 100 with people. Like, I don't, I don't really have that kind of deposit money right now. Like, I'm going to come to your school, but I don't know where you want me to get this money from. I mean, don't say it like that, but you can have a conversation about the cost prohibitive nature of deposits. Now, you want to be respectful, right? Like, don't say that and then like deposit at 10 places because you're not paying like that. You would be a trash human. And I don't want anyone listening to be a trash human, right? So we're still going to be ethical and realize that every time we deposit somewhere, it's taking a seat from someone else who might want to go. And so we're going to be super conscientious about that and try to only make one deposit. But you don't have to worry about, if I deposit now and I hear back later, I won't be able to go. Like, you can always, if you have new information, that's a very reasonable reason to break your deposit and then deposit at the school that you want to hear from. But, and like I said, we're going to be talking about deposits a little bit later too. You also have the option to ask your schools to extend your deposit. You can say, hey, I love your school, but I haven't heard back from like these 7 schools yet. Maybe pick one. Is it possible to extend your deposit deadline for 2 weeks? And then I'd go back to one of those 7 schools and be like, hey, I'm so excited, but this is the deposit deadline situation. I'm not saying that's going to speed up their decision, but I just think that everyone should just be informed of what's going on, right? Because ultimately, if they're making the decision to accept you and it's just taking a longer time, but if they're super excited about that, they would want the opportunity to be able to do that before you deposit somewhere else. Like I said, you can always, deposit there later, but I'm trying to be cost conscious and also kind to your fellow applicants. So, those are kind of the things that I want you to keep in mind. So that first piece, like, if you have not heard from your schools yet, what should you do? Depending on when you applied, the answer might be nothing, but the answer might be sending a status check or an update just to see. But I do not recommend reaching out, every month. And I don't really recommend sending letters of continued interest that they haven't asked for, because if you do that, you'll have less information to send in a later letter of continued interest. But it is totally fine for you to reach out. And this is a prime example of why you need to be creating relationships with admissions at the beginning of the application cycle so that you have a person or a contact that you could check in with. But how can you go about, being informed even when you have so much uncertainty? Start figuring out what makes the most sense to you with the schools that you have. Go to admitted students events. Go to any kind of networking events that you can. Reach out to affinity groups. Look at the finances. Put all of your financial information on a chart and really see what the delta is with your scholarships. And then that last piece, in terms of preparing for deposits, you want to make sure that you are what school you want to deposit at. You can ask for an extension if you need to. Sometimes they will grant that. And just if you have a hard time paying for deposits, make sure that you are also upfront about that as well. So that's kind of, a very large recap of what we went over. And we're really excited because boot camps are also back. Our first boot camp is actually going to start on April 6th. They are small cohorts for 4 to 5 students. We'll be running a new boot camp every month. Boot camps last 12 weeks. We go through the entirety of your application process, the core pieces, your personal statement, your diversity statement, your resume, any addenda, how to choose schools, brainstorming. We talk about financial aid and loans. You get this great community. Those are launching again on April 6th. I will see you guys next week.